This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutastrophe welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe birthday boy. And the birthday boy for September 23rd would have turned 78 today, but unfortunately he died this year in February. Now, I know that my rules are that it has to be a living athlete for a birthday, but there are some exceptions to the rule. And I couldn't really think about John Harbaugh in a positive way, so I decided to try to look for this. And I found Marty Schottenheimer. Man, what a name. Schottenheimer. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14 letters in his last name. Man, that was huge. But what people forget about Marty Schottenheimer is he was a linebacker in the NFL. He played in the NFL beforehand. He was a coach for the NFL for 22 years. He coached KC for 10 years, Cleveland and San Diego for 5, and the Redskins for only 1 season. Really? 1 season with the Redskins. Wow. He's 8th in career wins of all time. He has the most of any NFL head coach to not win a championship. Well, he did win a title with the United Football League, but who cares about that league? Anyway, Schottenheimer would be a good coach. Great regular seasons, terrible playoffs. That's the philosophy of many teams. In his 21 seasons, he made the playoffs 13 times and only had 2 losing records. That's pretty good. Unfortunately, though, the postseason was his bane, if you will. Schottenheimer would only win 5 postseason games in his career and would never get to the Super Bowl. His playoff winning percentage of .276 was terrible. In fact, it was a stark contrast to a .613 regular season winning percentage. And he's not in the Hall of Fame. Why? I don't know. So anyway, Schottenheimer was drafted. Well, he played for the Pitt Panthers from 62 to 64. He was selected in the 4th round of the NFL draft by the Baltimore Colts. However, in the AFL draft, he was picked 7th round by the Buffalo Bills. Surprisingly, he went to the AFL instead of the NFL, so he played for Buffalo for 4 years. And would spend their 4 years there, and even was the backup on one of the AFL squads Buffalo won the title with. So anyway, Schottenheimer, well, the big problem was with his last name was that when the NFL in 1970 mandated that teams put last names on jerseys, his name was really long. Anyway, Schottenheimer was traded from Buffalo to the Boston Patriots, and then he went to Pittsburgh, and then the Baltimore Colts. He retired from football and spent time in the real estate industry. He would actually become player coach of Portland in the World Football League, becoming their linebackers coach. He was then hired after the World Football League crumbled to be linebackers coach for the New York Giants and became the defensive coordinator. And then he became linebackers coach of the Detroit Lions. In 1980, he was made defensive coordinator for the Browns. Of course, that year was Red Right 88, I think, right? So anyway, Schottenheimer became head coach October 1984 after Cleveland got taken out by the New England Patriots. Cleveland had a chance to get the winning touchdown, but they failed. And the Browns fans were mad at him. Modell fired Ruggiano. The Browns were 1-7 when Schottenheimer became head coach. They didn't make the playoffs, but Schottenheimer guided them to a 4-4 mark. Anyway, Cleveland was happy getting Bernie Kosar in the supplemental draft. With Schottenheimer, Kosar, and many players on offense and defense were there. The team reached greater heights than Ruggiano and Sape. The Browns would fall short of the Super Bowl 3 times in the late 80s with Schottenheimer being coach. Anyway, all not stellar. The Browns were the best team in the AFC Central and got a match against the Miami Dolphins for the division in the divisional round. They were actually up 21-3 in Miami, which was shocking. Cleveland was going to crush Miami into fine powder. Unfortunately, Dan Marino made a great comeback, and the Browns were out 24-21. No big deal. However, the 86 season would be better for Cleveland. Kosar's play improved, the defense came together, and the Browns, in fact, broke a drought at Three Rivers Stadium, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The team would be 12-4. The Browns would play the New York Jets. Unfortunately, the Browns almost choked it thanks to Mark Mosley missing a field goal in the first overtime against the Jets. Fortunately, though, Cleveland held New York flat, and then Mosley kicked the winning field goal. It was the first time Cleveland won a playoff game since 1969 at that time. Then they would face the Denver Broncos at home in the AFC title game. And that was the drive game. Denver got out to a good lead. Cleveland tied the game, and they went up on a Brian Bennett field goal. I don't know. I forget what the last name of that guy was. But anyway, Cleveland was up 20-13. Denver made a mistake with the ball, and they were down at their own 2. Unfortunately, John Elway put up one of his greatest comebacks of all time. The drive, a 98-yard drive that ended in a touchdown to Mark Jackson, tied the game. Cleveland could not muster anything in their first possession of overtime. Denver did it, with Elway giving Rich Carlos a field goal that just made it inside the upright, won the game, and Cleveland was just upset. However, Cleveland did not make a mistake. They were the best team in the AFC Central for the 3rd straight year. In the divisional round, they beat the Colts, giving Schottenheimer his 2nd playoff win. Unfortunately, only 3 of them would happen after that. But anyway, yeah, they beat the Colts. It meant Broncos and Browns, this time in Denver for the AFC title game. The Broncos actually were up 21-3. Unfortunately, Cleveland came back. They were actually looking good. With the score 38-31, Cleveland was marching down the field to try to tie the game. But Biner made a terrible mistake. He had a clear path to the end zone, but Jeremiah Castile stopped him, and he fumbled it. The Broncos did take a safety intentionally to make it 38-33. So the Browns, for the 2nd straight year, had a terrible loss in the AFC title game and also a name game. The Browns somehow, in some way, made the playoffs due to, even though they had quarterback injuries in the 88-89 season. Cleveland would host Houston, and I think that Cleveland knew what they were doing. Kosar was still hurt, and they were trying to get Mike Pagel to be the hero after Don Struck was hurt. Pagel tried, but Houston surprised Cleveland 24-23. Schottenheimer decided to leave the team by mutual consent with Art Modell. So that was bad. So Schottenheimer ended up 44-27 in the regular season with the Browns, but a 2-4 mark in the playoffs. Although he would not lose job for long, as Kansas City decided to name him head coach in 1989. Schottenheimer was great, despite the fact that his Chiefs got shocked 17-16 by Seattle, even though that Derek Thomas had 7 sacks. Kansas City did, in fact, win. Well, in his first season, he was 11-5. It was the franchise's best finish since 1969. And stopped putting the fact that Bill Moss, former Kansas City defensive end, said that he put 2 tickets to the Kansas City game on his windshield, hoping someone would take them. But then he was surprised where there were 4 tickets there. The Chiefs would go to Miami in the wildcard game and lose by 1 point. The Chiefs would beat the LA Raiders in the end of the 91 season to get them to a wildcard game on home turf for the first time in 20 years. The last Chiefs home playoff game was that epic double overtime game and the longest game in history on Christmas Day, 1971. So It was amazing. The Raiders screwed up, turning the ball over not once, not twice, but 6 times, as the Chiefs beat the Raiders and got their first postseason victory since Super Bowl IV. They would go to Buffalo for the AFC divisional round, but Buffalo crushed them. Kansas City needed a big win in the 92 season. They were at 9-6. They needed to win, and Kansas City's defense crushed John Elway to finish 10-6. Unfortunately, the San Diego Chargers crushed Dave Craig, sacking him 7 times, and the Chargers won 17-0 in the West wildcard game. The Chiefs decided to install the West Coast offense. The new offensive coordinator, Paul Hackett, what's he to it? The Chiefs decided to get Joe Montana after San Fran left them going. Then they signed Marcus Allen, who played 11 years for the Raiders. Montana and Allen made their debuts with a 27-3 win over the Buccaneers. They actually clinched their first AFC West title since '71 in that '93 season, thanks to the Raiders losing. They went to the playoffs against the Pittsburgh Steelers on home turf in the wildcard game. Somehow, in some way, they won the game. They would have to head to Houston to play the hottest team in the NFL, the Oilers, in what would be the last game played, playoff game at the Astrodome. The Oilers looked good, but unfortunately, their offense sputtered a lot. And the Chiefs' offense with Joe Montana helped them win 28-20. So the Chiefs got to the AFC title game in Buffalo, trying for revenge from what happened a couple of years prior. Unfortunately, Buffalo would win 30-13. Not just that, Montana would be hurt and have to leave the game. Kansas City had a strong year in the 94 season. Montana would go to Miami to help Kansas City face Miami. Unfortunately, Miami prevailed 27-17 in the battle between Montana and Marino. Montana would subsequently retire. Kansas City shocked a lot of people with Steve Bono now the head quarterback for the 95 Chiefs. They were 13-3. They actually didn't lose the game against their divisional rivals, and they didn't lose a game at home, which was amazing. Well, their rushing offense will help too. So it was amazing. Their 6th straight postseason berth. The Colts, for some strange reason, lost the divisional round game at home against the Indianapolis Colts, the plucky Colts. Kansas City lost due to bad field goals from Lynn Elliott, who missed 3 field goals, a couple of them chip shots. On a normal day, he would have made them. By the way, the 95 Colts nearly went to the Super Bowl because they lost to the Steelers in the AFC title game. If it wasn't for that Hail Mary being botched in the end zone. Kansas City seemed pretty well and all that. In the 96 season, but they lost a tiebreaker to Jacksonville for the playoffs. Jacksonville would go on to beat Buffalo and Denver to get to the AFC title game. Kansas City signed Elvis Grbac to be quarterback, and they did well, 13-3, never losing a game on home turf. In fact, the Kansas City Chiefs of that year, 97, broke a record by the 1934 Lions by not permitting a second half touchdown in 10 consecutive games. The Chiefs would face the Denver Broncos in the divisional round and the 1 seed in the playoffs. Sadly, though, Denver shocked everyone by winning 14-10. That series events led to John Elway's first Super Bowl. Kansas City didn't do so well. They were 7-9 in the 98 season, and Schottenheimer decided to retire. He won 101 games with the Chiefs as head coach. So Schottenheimer became a football analyst for ESPN, basically blasting Washington owner Daniel Snyder for being meddlesome. And Schottenheimer was then hired as coach of the Skins in 2001. They were 0-5 to start the year, but they started to win 5. They won 5 straight games. They were 8-8. Schottenheimer would be let go by Daniel Snyder. I guess it was probably playoffs or bust for Snyder. Washington would get Steve Spurrier to be their head coach, and that didn't last long. However, he wasn't out of a job for long. San Diego picked him up, needing something. They were terrible in 2003. They were 4-12, getting the first overall pick. And Eli Manning refused to play for San Diego. But they drafted him. But the good news is that the Giants drafted Phillip Rivers, and they made a trade, getting Phillip Rivers. Schottenheimer would make a great success. He was 4-12, and then he picked up an 8-game improvement, being 12-4. He was coach of the year. So the Chargers had their first winning record and playoff berth since 1995, and their first division title since '94. But the Chargers didn't stop there. In 2006, he had the team at its peak. LaDainian Tomlinson's MVP season and a 14-2 mark, the best regular season in team history and the best record. So San Diego looked like they were going to roll to the Super Bowl. Of course, the 2004 run ended. They were facing the New York Jets at home in the wildcard round and lost 20-17. Nick Keating had a chance to win the game for San Diego, but he missed a big field goal, which meant the Jets kicked the winning field goal. But, of course, the 14-2 Chargers lost to the Patriots in the division round. It was devastating. The Chargers made 2 terrible mistakes with their lead in the fourth quarter. Chargers safety Marlon McCree basically sealed the game with interception. However, he fumbled the ball and the Pats got it back. Dean Keating missed a 53-yard field goal that would have forced overtime. So Schottenheimer's playoff record ended up being 5-13. Schottenheimer would be back even though it happened. But Schottenheimer was then fired by the Chargers. It was just dysfunctional and all that. So, yeah. It was just terrible and all that. Spanos was not a good owner of the Chargers, kind of meddling in Schottenheimer's affairs. Schottenheimer was pretty good. And then he went to the UFL and won the title. Schottenheimer's coaching style was known as Marty Ball, a strong running game, a passing game that limited turnovers and aggressive defense. However, it was a little too conservative and all that, because he played not to lose and only winning 5 playoff games in his career. I mean, honestly. But, Schottenheimer had a good coaching tree. His coaching trees include Bruce Arians, Bill Cowher, Tony Dungy, Herm Edwards, Hugh Jackson, Wade Phillips, Art Shell, and Mark Trestman. So, yeah, he did pretty well. He married his wife and had 2 children. His son Brian was an NFL coach, not head coach, but anyway. Schottenheimer, unfortunately, would be diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2011. But he was put in hospice care, and on February 8, 2021, he died at the age of 77. His postseason runs would always be hit for his failures in the playoffs and all that. It's not fair, though. I mean, he was a good coach. We have a good regular season, but in the end, it just wasn't meant to be. If it'll be, it'll be, but it wasn't. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.